Today, we have the honor and privilege of having Erin Miller with us, a marketing professional with over 20 years of experience in both agency and in-house roles across various industries. She specializes in using for-profit marketing strategies to benefit nonprofit organizations. Erin currently serves on the board of Glenshaw Century Club, where her strategic insights have grown membership by 30% year over year and increased donations, event attendance, and awareness as the marketing and public relations executive committee chair. Throughout her career, Erin has delivered innovative solutions and a results driven approach to diverse clients. Her venture capital experience allows her to create marketing strategies that engage audiences and demonstrate clear ROI to stakeholders. And as the owner and CEO of Brand Strategies Group, Erin leads impactful marketing campaigns that boost brand visibility and drive fundraising efforts through her blend of traditional marketing and mission-driven strategies, which has earned her a reputation as a trusted advisor. Erin has also won AMA Pittsburgh's Marketer of the Year award and the People's Choice Award from the North Hills Art Center. She has completed 3 marathons and raised over $5,000 for young adult survivors. United, a nonprofit supporting young adult cancer patients and their families. And Erin's dedication to excellence and passion for making a meaningful impact continues to drive her success, making her a valuable asset to any organization. So everyone, please welcome Erin Miller.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I am really grateful for the opportunity to connect everyone today to host this discussion about why it's important to consider for-profit strategies in your nonprofit marketing, adventures. So it was really nice to see everyone at the Marquee Awards ceremony earlier this year. And I want to thank Mike and AMA for the opportunity to continue to host events. It sounds like a really coming the rest of this summer, especially. So I'm excited to see you all there. So let's get started by talking about why marketing and fundraising are the perfect pair and why I'm speaking about it today. So as he mentioned, I have 20 some years of marketing experience, and also relevant to that, I have 30 years of working with nonprofits in varying roles from volunteering to fundraising. And because my background is so blended and my experience is also very unique, I think it gives me some insights into being very adaptable or flexible in considering the solution regardless of industry or setting. But some of my experience within the nonprofit space includes being a wish grantor at Make-A-Wish Arizona at their headquarter location, 412 Food Rescue, working with the Greater Pittsburgh Food Bank, the Cancer Caring Center, and so on. And so whenever I received the Marquee Award for Marketer of the Year, that was relevant to the work I had done with the Glenshaw Century Club in the nonprofit space. So I'll expand a little bit more about that later. But for what we're going to cover today is we're going to start with understanding the parallels between for-profit and nonprofit marketing strategies. We're going to work through the imperatives of fundraising within the nonprofit space and how marketing can influence that. We'll talk about effective marketing strategies for fundraising. So we'll dive into practical strategies about creating a fundraising plan, a marketing plan, and a campaign. We'll also talk about impact statements and why they're very important and useful for marketers to leverage within a nonprofit space. And then lastly, we'll talk about justifying marketing expenses within a nonprofit. And I know that's typically a pretty lean and mean team and a lean budget as well. So we'll talk about how we have those conversations internally. I hope today's presentation speaks to both, the marketing professional as well as someone who's focused on nonprofits who may not have as much marketing experience in that realm. I know nonprofits have, again, a pretty lean team and wear many hats. So there'll be tiered levels of engagement today and information. So let's get started with the marketing parallels between a nonprofit and a for-profit. I think it's important to start with why we need to look at for-profits in the first place. So on top of having a really oversaturated market in the nonprofit space, right, there's been a 29% increase in nonprofits. Pittsburgh is a philanthropic hub. There's intense competition within the nonprofit space to vie for attention and for donors and corporate partnerships. You also have a very high saturation now of mission-driven for-profit organizations. So over, especially the last, 15 to 20 years, the consumer trends certainly lead into being mission-driven through conscious capitalism, and they also are financially incentivized through grants, subsidies, tax credits within the environmental, society, social, and governance space, as well as corporate responsibility space. And you're also seeing for-profit organizations have impact investing strategies, right? How do I tie into consumer behavior that is mission driven? So on top of having a lot of nonprofits competing for attention, for-profits are now coming into the nonprofit space, and they're bringing with them really large teams, really large budgets, and the ability to be more nimble within the technology and campaign space with some flexibility. So I think it's important to note that for-profits are already coming in to take a chunk of the pie out of the nonprofit space. So let's look at some of the things that are similar between nonprofit and for-profits. So mission-driven, right? Nonprofits are mission-driven. That's no surprise. However, now for-profits are also becoming mission-driven. They are looking for loyalty, and how do they tie into consumer behavior at an emotional level for long-term loyalty to the brand that sets them apart from maybe product transactions or singular transactions. Same thing with engagement. So they're looking to engage a community through narratives, something that nonprofits have traditionally done very well. For-profits are doing that through social media and other long-form content that mixes really well with those short snippets online to tell people who you are and why you want to shop with them or give your money to them, right? Storytelling. So nonprofits have always been excellent storytellers. This is done through development directors and managers, fundraising, outreach. For-profits are also storytelling. They've been spending the last, 100 years of consumerism also focusing on how they tell the story of a product to a brand and now a feeling. And lastly, multi-channel, right? It's the ability to verbally tell the story, to do it in writing, to be able to convert that message effectively. However, there are still some key differences, even though they're behaving similarly, that are underneath the surface still quite different, right? So nonprofits, the primary objective is still to generate donations that support the organization's mission. And for-profits, they're certainly using mission-driven marketing to tie into driving revenue, right? So they are still both seeking funding, just with different purposes and intents. Success metrics. So, right, missions impact higher priority funding than financial metrics. So the ROI is the first priority for for-profit organizations. So what is the return on this? And I need an immediate transaction. Where's the data? What can I see as an immediate return on my marketing investment? Whereas nonprofits see the value of long-term returns within the community, more of like a social impact return on investment, a longer-term play. Budget and resources. Obviously, nonprofits have a very limited budget by, traditionally being very nimble and spending most of their time and effort and money on going back to the cause. Whereas for-profits, although they are being mission driven and acting similarly to nonprofits, right now they are very much more nimble and they have prioritized marketing as part of their operations overall. Same thing with messaging, although at face value, both can be a little bit blended on how they approach mission over traditional business models or profitability models. There are still some differences. The manipulation of mission and feeling in the for-profit space is leveraged to the overall good of the organization, where often nonprofits, they are leveraging mission-driven statements, but it's the individual's impact and contribution that they're intending you to feel. So with that said, because for-profits and nonprofits are functioning very similarly and those lines are blurred, and the efforts that marketing can play in both nonprofits and for-profits can be a little bit blended or a gray area, I thought it'd be interesting to talk about if we can tell if this is a for-profit or nonprofit mission statement. So build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. So if anyone wants to chime in on the chat, if you think this is for business, for profit, or if it's a nonprofit business, if you have an idea of whose mission statement this is. Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Any other takers? Why I believe it's hard? Yes. And you're all getting it. So I didn't try hard enough on this slide. So the answer here is this mission statement is Patagonia. And so Patagonia's mission statement embodies values and objectives commonly associated with nonprofits, such as environmental responsibility and ethical business practices. But that makes it easy to mistake it for a nonprofit. It starts to have that blended view of what their purpose is. This blurring of lines really underscores their commitment to social environmental causes, and it really distinguishes it from a traditional for-profit entity. And you can see that this is a reflection of an early adopter. So Patagonia was certainly an early adopter in how they tied in their products with their mission, to kind of blur those lines and say we're more than sales and profit here. We have a longer term commitment to the environment and to the community. And that's something, again, they're using a for-profit model to dip their toe in the nonprofit space. So with that said, although not for-profits are continuing to encroach on the nonprofit space with mission-driven work, something that for-profit organizations can't replace is, I believe, authenticity. So there have been a number of trends that have happened over the course of the last 100 years, right? Of product development into sales, the saturation of companies offering similar products, e-commerce, being mission driven. I would like to think is a long-term marketing strategy for for-profits because it can feel sincere and it feels good. But based off of, obviously history, right? There are marketing trends that will then sway and move with the market, and nonprofits retain the ability to be authentic, and that their entire organization, their mission is around serving the community. This is not a temporary trend in how they approach the market. This is not a trend in how they market and have those conversations with consumers or donors. Authenticity gives nonprofits endurance. With that being said, you can have endurance, but the way you make yourself relevant and stay current would certainly be to compete like a for-profit organization. So nonprofits should adopt for-profit marketing methodologies to help hit their fundraising goals. And obviously, these are a lot of really great things that for-profits and nonprofits do and scale. But primarily today, I wanted to focus on strategic planning because I believe that's the biggest differentiator between for-profit and nonprofit marketing strategies. And strategic planning obviously comes with the idea of having time and a team to achieve those. But what I'm going to get to next, whenever we develop fundraising plans, would be how a very nimble, small marketing team can really shine in tactical ways within the marketing space, either as a marketer or as someone who's a development director who is also wearing the marketing hat, and how those two kind of dovetail together through this strategy. So setting the stage for today of why we're talking about for-profits and nonprofit parallels, I wanted to open up any questions if anyone has any ideas on, companies that you feel do an exceptional job of blurring the lines between for-profit and nonprofit. If there are companies that you feel are certainly leveraging mission-driven work to encroach in on nonprofit spaces, and if they've had any tactics that you've taken of note. So if anyone wants to chime in on the chat, if not, and all these slides, except for the mission statement hit out of the park, I'm okay to move on too. So I'll just give a second here if anyone has any questions. Ooh, yes, Dawn Dish Soap, OpenAI. Ben and Jerry's, yes, yeah, actually Ben and Jerry's is a great example because they've made their entire product existence about their mission and have been very tied in. And I think also for Ben and Jerry's, they've not shied away from having pretty strong stances at the potential risk of alienating, in part, consumers that may not be entirely tied into their values. But I think because they stand for something, they'll fall for nothing, right? Like that's the old adage of like, what do you stand for? And like, I think that is a strong example of a for-profit brand standing behind morals and values in their mission. Yeah, and you're right, actually, Bill, a lot of financial service firms right now are working on ESG investing, and they're seeing those subsidies and those credits, and the risk and reward here is getting more enticing for banks and venture capital firms as well, because certainly those companies such as like venture capital is obviously profit driven. I can speak to that one because I had been with one for about 10 years, and it's about maximizing profit and minimizing costs. And how you minimize the cost or maximize your tax return, right, is by leaning into those subsidies those government grants, anything that you can kind of write off, certainly help with that. Same thing. Yes, Tom's actually was at the forefront of that as well. Thanks for bringing that up, Misha. Tom's, I think, has done an exceptional job of being at the forefront of that. They were definitely an early adopter of a shoe for me, a shoe for someone in need. And they've since expanded that into other areas of focus in their product line. And many other competitors have mimicked that over the years. I can't remember if it's Bob's. It's another first name type of shoe company that also has taken on that part. Same thing with Warby Parker now offers, glasses for someone in need. And so over the last 10 to 15 years, making that correlation has been slowly chipping away into mission-driven work. But now with the incentives, it's impossible not to be a for-profit organization focused on the feel-good piece of this. So thank you. I appreciate everyone's feedback on that. So let's talk about fundraising, and we're going to get a little in the weeds. However, you will get the worksheets and workbooks that correspond with this presentation following this. So although there may be a lot of text on some of these slides as examples, I wouldn't worry too much about reading every item, although I'd love if you did, but you can do that in the workbook following this meeting. So let's talk about prioritizing fundraising and thinking like a nonprofit. So because revenue fuels their mission, vision, and values, for profits will view marketing as a business imperative. Usually, obviously, we know on this call that marketers are required to be the expert of all other departments, right? We are a foot in the door with operations, with finance. We are usually in a CMO role. You are heavily leaned on by your CEO to be the learner and listener of things outside of the marketing realm, and that's usually the first stop on how do we move the needle on revenue, right? While fundraising fuels their mission, vision, and values, nonprofits actually have a little bit of a different perspective on marketing because it's considered a nice to have. Because if you look at the budget for a nonprofit, every single dollar for most nonprofits is going back into a level of commitment to the community. And that's, and as you see with some nonprofits, if that administrative portion of the budget gets a little too high, it doesn't look very good on that part, right? Not to mention any nonprofits by name, but I'm certain if you Google nonprofits that of the larger scale that have had some negative press, it's certainly because that administrative line and, including the salaries of maybe top executives and those commitments are too big in that pie. So obviously we want to keep that small, and we require team members in nonprofits to wear a lot of hats. Most importantly, I thought what was interesting from a recent survey was that 57% of nonprofits do not have a fundraising plan. So we acknowledge it's the lifeblood of what makes a nonprofit move forward. And yet overwhelmingly 60% almost do not have a fundraising plan. It's up here in your mind, but it's not formalized in the world where we have a tailored goal that everyone can shoot towards. So with that said, marketing can have a really great influence on helping a development director or helping a nonprofit, a marketer working in a nonprofit to lead or strongly support a fundraising plan. And the value to formalizing a fundraising plan from marketing's perspective, right? The more detail, the more research and narrowed focus we develop up front, our marketing plans obviously become more clear, strategic, more streamlined, more cost-effective later on. So let's talk about how the core pillars of a fundraising plan are influenced by marketers. So obviously we are exceptional, and I will toot our own horn in this because I'm very excited about marketing, as you can tell. So set clear goals, right? So marketers are exceptional at setting SMART goals. We are held to very specific and measurable guidelines throughout all of our practices. And although they're not always formalized due to our own time, we do know the strategies behind it. Identifying your audience. So all of our technology that we use, whether it's tech or it's out of the home, are about who we're speaking to, how we're speaking to them, meeting the consumer where they're at, and understanding audience behavior. Developing key messages. We are great at speaking emotionally and logically and statistically about topics based off of those audience behaviors. Choosing fundraising methods. So we are great at research and budgeting for which ones we should prioritize for avenues of raising funds. Implementing marketing tactics, right? So like overall, a fundraising plan still has a very strong portion of this, percentage of this, that's marketing. It's still Maybe it's considered business development and sales, but that's what also marketing is, right? We are in part understanding the language and conveying that out. And same thing with monitoring and evaluating. We are exceptional with reporting. We understand the data. We understand what a success metric is, right? And those KPIs that we can help formalize people outside of marketing or other marketers that may be working within the nonprofit space that don't have the bandwidth. Those are areas that we can all collaboratively work together to help make a fundraising plan. So with that said, some of these examples were methods that I had leveraged with the Glenshaw Century Club. So as I mentioned before, the Marquee Award and my work within the nonprofit space is very strongly connected into the Glenshaw Century Club. And a little background on them is they're an organization that started in the 1940s as a women's only group. Women at the time were not allowed to join men's groups. So they were in part looking for something social as well as the feel-good piece. And so they started this organization with a handful of women in the local regional, Shaler area, Glenshaw area, just north of Pittsburgh. And they did it with the cause of raising milk money for kids in need, seeing children go to school without, their lunch bag in hand. And how do we help them? And those small little incremental giving moments, if you will, led to them formalizing the Glenshaw Century Club. And the Century Club at one point actually was part of a national fabric. There were Century Clubs in cities across the country, and they've since dissolved. And the Century Club in Pittsburgh is, I believe, from my own research, the last existing arm of that group. And so with that, over the course of the last, 80 years, the membership have aged. They have left the group for various reasons. The mission had changed a little bit. There was a lack of clarity on what they were looking to achieve. And that's what a fundraising plan does. It helps everyone revisit that conversation about who we are and what we do. And it's a great tool from a branding perspective and from marketing. It's a way to help them feel like they're helping steer this ship, and using marketing's tactics to then put it into motion and formalize it. So having those conversations with the members and the board of directors and the executive committee, with the Century Club, and they openly joke that the Century Club's median age is actually 100, which is why it's named that. So it's a common joke amongst the group. So being someone a little under 100, I came into this thinking, if we want this group to grow, how can I help support them tailoring that mission, right? So working with them to formalize their fundraising goals was our first step. And so the plan I'll show you here in a moment was something that we had implemented and we within the club. But that was able to steer the conversation of, do you want to grow? How do you want to grow? You need individual donations. We need to find a way of utilizing technology. Their website was very outdated. They were afraid of tech. I believe one person may have gotten a swipe or a square for their phone for in-person events, but were too afraid to use it. So it was like using this as a conversation to bridge that gap into, it's okay, change is okay. How do we get change adopted in an incremental manner? Enhancing member experience, right? So people who were leaving, how do we get them to stay? What are some of the things that we can do to make this group of value to them? So that they see that, again, it's not just a nice to have to be a part of, it's actually changing the lives of people in the immediate community. And increasing membership. So we talked about what a realistic goal would be. So we talked about 25%. Can we get 25% by the end of the year? What does that look like? What will we do to get there? So hearing them from a fundraising perspective and translating that into a marketing tactic, going, okay, I hear that this is what you're repeating to people verbally. How can I put that into something more formalized? So that's, that's recruiting materials, that's brochures, that is membership applications. Do we need events? Things that marketing really shine at. How do we translate that? So again, they're steering what they want to get from this, and we are providing them with the avenues. So by doing those things and having that fundraising plan together, I was then able to create a marketing plan that would help them hit those goals. And I'm really proud to say that we did. Within the first 9 months, we had 32% membership growth. They have hit their goals and then some since then. So this was from last year. They also saw a growth in social media. So I'm at first doing it myself and then teaching other members in their 70s and 80s, how to use Canva or whatever they're open to, right? Like I want them to feel empowered and enabled. And also, by the way, side note, working with a bunch of seniors has made me break down my stereotypes or preconceived notions about what age and ability to change look like. And I hope I'm as lucky as half of those women to half as lucky as those women to be able to continually stay open to what the future holds and with technology. And so because we had those conversations, then we were able to actually work through bigger projects that they were previously afraid of, like a rebrand, right? What does their new logo look like? Give them a whole new website, give them supporting materials. And all of that was spurred because we talked through a fundraising plan. So with that said, let's get to the nitty gritty of what this is, right? So based on what we've just covered, and there are a lot of similarities to how a nonprofit and a for-profit marketer function, right? So thinking of it through for-profit lens, we certainly want to create the lead funnel, right? At the top of the funnel, highest engagement, and work our way down into the details to conversion. I view this the same way, and this is kind of a mission funnel for us, working in the nonprofit space. And so obviously above everything is our mission statement. Again, the authenticity of sincerely meaning that you are here for the community for the long haul is that hook that the nonprofits have over for-profits. How do we support prioritizing that and sharing that mission statement with others? We work with leaders, either marketers within the nonprofit space. We work with the development director, is usually a key person within nonprofits. Their executive committees are people, again, volunteering their time and open to what will help push their own personal objectives within their areas of focus along. And fundraising is that conversation. Obviously, then we can focus on the marketing plan, right? How are we taking those fundraising initiatives and putting a purpose and a tactic or a strategy behind them? And then lastly, the campaign plan. So the campaign is, obviously the tactical implementation of all of those things together. So if your mission statement is your why and your fundraising plan is your what, your marketing plan is who and how you'll connect with people, and then your campaign is where and when. And that's kind of the methodology I look at and how I translate that to nonprofits that I work with. So let's start with that fundraising plan and organizational goals. So before I show you this slide, I do want to repeat that this will be in a workbook that will be shared afterwards. So forgive me if you have to squint a little. I'm just going to extract a couple of these points to walk through together. So the fundraising plan, this is what my strategic planning template looks like whenever I work with a nonprofit. It looks very similar, I'm sure, to some of the integrated marketing and communications plans you may have worked on in the past. It may look similar to other fundraising plans you yourself have worked on prior. And also, I'm open to ideas and hosting this conversation about if there are ways to improve this fundraising plan, because it's so critical to a nonprofit to have. And again, if 60% of them don't have one, we need to make sure that if we provide them with one, it's something that's attainable, that's usable, that they will find of value, so that we can move that number, like ideally in a year or two. I would love to see that number drop dramatically. So let's think about that. So part of this, right, is breaking down those 3 to 5 primary fundraising goals. And so I've highlighted in white here the one I'm going to focus on today. The donor acquisition goal listed here to increase individual giving by 10% through monthly giving programs. That is what we're going to talk about today between the fundraising plan, the marketing plan, and the campaign. So I just wanted to thread that for you. So obviously the strategy overall is to promote and expand monthly giving options. What's the outcome if we do this? It's increased number of recurring donors. Here's where marketing, again, can come into play. What are the tactics for getting this done? And so if you are a nonprofit who is fundraising oriented or business development oriented, bring in someone from marketing or from another department. What helps move the needle? What channels are you currently using, and how can you leverage marketing for that? And as a marketer, this is your opportunity to chime in with your level of expertise and saying, these are the avenues that we can support because you've told me that donor acquisition is so important to you. So as you can see, there are some overlaps between marketing role and a development director or another nonprofit leader. Most importantly, amongst all of these is the owner, and that's the person who hits send. And again, small teams, many hats. It's hard for things to progress whenever you are focused equally on so many things, and you need, and there's also equal commitment to these goals, right? There will be many people involved in donor acquisition, but you need that one person who carries the football across the goal line, right? Like we need one person to carry the ball. And I think that's a really critical talking point as well with fundraising, because it needs to have a home. If fundraising is the most critical element, um, do you have the bandwidth? How can I help? Who will be in charge of dictating this across beginning to end? So with that said, you'll get this and you'll get a fillable PDF that's a clean version of this that you can use as exercise for fundraising plans. You can also forward this to nonprofits as well, so that way they can fill it in on their own. And there's also a how-to section. And oh, thank you so much, Chelsea. Appreciate the support. Yes, I love this chart, although it does look a little like an eye chart. But again, less on the content, more on the structure for the conversation today. The marketing plan. So we'll talk about the departmental goals, right? So we're taking that next level down in our mission funnel, if you will. And we're going to talk about how a marketing plan supports your fundraising plan. So let's take a little bit of a step back, right? So again, similar structure. And this is where the marketing person comes into play and takes the lead, or the developmental director or business development director can then come in and say, all right, based off of my experience, I've talked to a few people, other leaders, what are they doing? Tailoring this into marketing, here's what I believe relates to those fundraising goals. So again, focusing on increasing individual giving by 10% in the middle here. The fundraising goals are then broken down by, by the marketing strategy, the key messaging, again, those tactics that we talked about before. This is where you're going to get into some budget ideas of what might I need to invest in. Setting a timeline, again, we go back to those SMART goals that we're really great at formalizing. So a timeline and making sure that we have a very clear and agreed upon level of commitment to production work through the execution side of it and the frequency of it as well. And then our expertise here in those conversations with our fundraiser to say, okay, metrics for success. This is how I will translate that fundraising goal to something that is data I can show you that we're moving the needle on. So that next part of the funnel is going to be the campaign. So I'm going to just, again, focus on increasing individual giving by 10%. And just for more context for everyone on the call, so what monthly giving would be an example of, instead of making a $5 donation, I'm now registered on the website to give $5 every month. And I need the quantity of people to complete that transaction to increase by 10%. So that way, overall, our donations grow. We have a larger database and we're making a bigger impact by the collective good of smaller donations, possibly, and higher volume from numerous people. And so that's really critical to smaller regional nonprofits, because they are often at these smaller craft events, they're at smaller charitable events, they are in maybe median income that's of a lower than national average, right? Like there are a few different strategies of looking at higher volume, lower transaction, and it's less scary. You're more likely to convert people if it's $5 a month versus $50 a month or whatever that is. So again, it's a good tactic and a good conversation to open the door to then nurturing those leads to get more money from them later, because right, that's our end goal, is to get more money from people so that way our cause can make a bigger impact in the community. So lastly, we're going to talk about the campaign plan. And I'm sure most people on this call are probably most familiar with the marketing plan and the campaign plan, but I wanted to show how that fundraising goal translates. So this campaign plan, this view is just speaking to that one goal again. So it's to increase individual giving by 10% through monthly giving program. How are we going to do that? Email marketing, web optimization, events. And so we're looking at channel first. And again, associating what that channel can do to support this objective. Then we break it down by audience, what that key message is, the tactic, again, expense and budgets. So these are things I feel like marketers typically have either formalized or not in their daily toolkit. So I know that's a lot of charts. Again, you'll get those in a fillable PDF after, but I wanted to see how everyone was doing right now. So, based on those, are there plans that look familiar to you? Are there plans that you think are missing a couple of items that have been really helpful for you in the past? Or any further explanation on maybe how these are connected? I'll look in the chat, and again, I guess silence means it's all good. But if not, then I'll respond. But otherwise, I'll keep on moving because I also want to be mindful of everyone's time as well. So, and if we have any questions, there hopefully will be a couple of minutes at the end too where we can reconnect. Awesome. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate that. The framework is something I've practiced over the last 10 years with nonprofits, and especially smaller, more I don't want to say antiquated because it sounds negative, but organizations that have been slower to adopt new policies and change are the ones I see the biggest gap on formalizing within plans or technology, right? Just even teaching my fellow, my women at the Century Club what Google Sheets was quite the experience. But if anyone has ever taught their grandparents or a parent how to use the internet, it's very similar, right? Lots of patience and the ability to translate how to do something in a variety of ways. So let's talk about strategies next. We're going to talk about how marketing strategies then support fundraising. And marketing and fundraising actually share the same language, which I think is something to note here. So the core three elements, whether you are fundraising first, marketing second, if you're a marketer first and you're also responsible for fundraising, both roles are exceptional at identifying and segmenting donors, like we talked about, creating compelling campaigns, like business development and sales, and people who are verbally communicating are still campaigning. They are campaigning verbally to these people for engagement, and marketing is enabling that conversation to go online into other formats and be translated differently. Same thing with building long-term relationships. These relationships are with our board of directors, they're with our executive committee members, they're with our donors, our corporate partnerships. All of those things still very much apply in the for-profit, nonprofit space. Again, it's the same tactics and similar language being mission-driven in our approach, but nonprofits will continue to be able to lead by having really authentic messaging in those same channels and with those similar tactics. So again, focusing back on what that 10% increase in monthly giving looks like, that's through, again, we are exceptional at having really targeted email campaigns that can highlight different benefits to different donors, having social media promotions that will convert people online into that monthly giving campaign versus a single transaction, website banners. It's about that multiple omni-channel touch that we are so good at, that we can then complement fundraising with, and actually have a bigger audience, really more people to touch within our space in support of fundraising. So with that said, I just wanted to touch base back again on what planning and strategies look like from a marketing perspective. And I think that really just kind of reiterates this section that we had before on marketing being exceptional at supporting fundraising. I do want to move ahead into the impact section. So what are impact statements and why do we need them? And why, how is marketing able to, why should we care? It really is the summary of that. So defining impact statements. So impact statements you may or may not have seen in the for-profit or nonprofit space, but primarily in the nonprofit space. These are one-page to multi-page documents that are used to articulate the purpose and importance of the organization. They are used to highlight key components of how the organization is impacting the community, what they're using their funding for, again, showcasing very tangible results and communicating the value to stakeholders. So think of an impact statement as your elevator pitch. And if I had to shove a lot of information and data in front of somebody, it better be weighted with what's most important up front. And then, use this look at it as a sales slick and the summation of all of the work that the nonprofit has done. And also, there is a substantial portion of nonprofits that don't have impact statements. So low-hanging fruit. I think it's really important for us to think about, we are data experts and we're able to tell stories. How can we translate that in a way that resonates with donors and volunteers, et cetera? And how this gets used is actually it's multi-purpose, so it has a lot of life to it. You send this out to someone you're considering asking for a large donation. You send this out to someone you're considering recruiting as a member of your organization. You can give this to as part of a package to other civic services that you donate to from your nonprofit, your board of directors. This is a summation of all the things that you've done that are great for the community, and you should brag about it, right? So let's, again, talk about a little bit more of the structure of these if you're going to be creating your first one. I also want to note that Canva is free for nonprofits as a 501c3. So there's a page with an application. You have to just supply that 501c3 documentation, and then your Canva account is free. So I highly recommend that nonprofits leverage that. And in the design section, if you type impact report or impact statement, you'll get 1 million of these free templates. This is actually one from Canva because I wanted to show that it's preloaded in a way that's effectively prompting someone in a nonprofit to fill in what they need to in those areas, right? So this top section here is always to articulate the purpose. The next section here is how we can highlight key components, make it very clear and concise in your messaging, have a little bit of your narrative and quantifiable data here, tangible results. So if you have specific examples of your project, the hurdles that this had to overcome and the outcome in the community, threading that story beginning to end is really effective. If not, I encourage you to find those big data points or testimonials and use that in your tangible results section. Value to stakeholders, obviously photographs of volunteers or people impacted, making that visual connection with the actual people who benefit from this is key. And you want to use that section on the left to get those instant transactions, like the feel good part of it. By the way, this is who and how we do the work, and please contact us, right? So not to get too ahead of ourselves, because for-profits, obviously have been exceptional at doing impact reports to some degree in the past. And once you influence your nonprofit to implement a impact statement, then that's great. But again, for-profits are encroaching on that space. So this report is actually an impact report for a for-profit organization. And this is for banks, venture capital firms, like Patagonia and Tom's are also leveraging this, but they call it a company benefit report. Again, blurring the lines between what is a mission-driven organization that's a nonprofit or a for-profit. So with that said, I wanted to check in and see if anyone has experience with impact statements, if they have done one in the past, if they feel that has been leveraged well within that space. Does it translate to being a for-profit marketer, and what you've done to generate materials or like those reporting dashboards for your for-profit customers? Those things I feel are very tied in together closely. And then, our last section here is going to be ROI. So I also want to be mindful of time, and we're about 10 to 1 right now. So I will, again, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat, and we can also address those at the end. So let's talk about marketing investments. And I'm sure all of us chuckle a little bit when we think about, asking for money as a marketer. It's very difficult most times to ask for money in that space. And it's even more difficult working in a nonprofit to ask for funding, to run your campaign, to hire an agency for support, and to do those things. It's quite difficult. But whether you're a marketer or you're a development director, a business development manager within a fundraising capacity, there are, I think, a few items you can start with either to implement or have the conversation with your nonprofit. So again, we've talked about how we're great at setting clear goals. We are also exceptional at identifying key performance indicators as well. We are exceptional at collecting data and analyzing it for the needs of others, as well as ourselves, so that we can improve the performance of our campaigns. What I'd like us to focus on here too is obviously, having the conversation with nonprofits or with, within the fundraising space for people who may not understand all of the metrics and all of the math that goes into being a marketer, I think a really great conversation point with nonprofits is talking about how profitable a campaign is. And I know that that comes with many levels of analysis, but I think a really good talking tool is this formula, right? So formulating the net profit from marketing efforts versus the cost of it. And so in this example, right, I was able to go back to the Century Club. This is for one fundraising event, to say, okay, I think we need a combination of materials and advertising costs together, totaling $1,000, but it generated $5,000. And so for me to be able to go back and have that higher level conversation on return on investment with nonprofits in a way I believe they understand as non-marketers is a really good talking point. So 400%, great return. However, that percentage is all relative to the industry or the type of event or the situation. So it doesn't hurt to, compare that metric against what you've collected in the past, either from other nonprofits or for-profit marketing strategies for other industries. I think if you're a non-marketer, this is a really simple piece of math that shows the impact it could have for marketing in the nonprofit space. And I think it just opens the door to, if they trust you on that level of information, they will trust you and believe you whenever you get a little more in the weeds on campaign performance and click-through rates and what that means for them, and all of these other data points, which again, outside of marketing, can feel like a foreign language. So by converting this into something that feels relevant to them and something that should speak their language, I think it makes marketing seem a little more attainable and worth the investment. So, lastly, we've talked a lot about how for-profits and nonprofits are blending their efforts. And I think I've also alluded to how fundraising departments and marketing departments also kind of interlude on some of their efforts. And so how do we make this work? And it turns out it's a perfect pair because we have the same goals, we have the same objectives, we have the same way of going about achieving those goals too. We are, great at multi-channel outreach, whether you're in marketing or outside of marketing. You are an exceptional storyteller in a nonprofit, and the story you tell is so impactful. It's an easy story to tell. It just needs put into that elevator pitch, that impact statement, that small piece of information that's digestible at a glance to summarize your impact and your mission. Stakeholder engagement and showcasing impact, right? All of those things are what fundraising and marketing do both exceptionally well, and I think could work as the perfect match to making a difference within the nonprofit space. And so with that said, forgive the pitch slide, but I did want to share that, Brand Strategies Group does donate a portion of their time to pro bono work with nonprofits. The main objective for me starting Brand Strategies Group was because I have 30 years of nonprofit experience, and I seem to have an analytical or a data-driven mind in the creative space, and I sought for the last 40 years or so of my life to go, where do these things intertwine? And Brand Strategies Group is that for me. I enjoy helping nonprofits, grow their mission, grow their impact, and above all else, even if I'm not the right solution for people, whether that's what their objectives are, their budget, their time, I think it's important to have the conversations to tell them how to find those resources, to provide them with these worksheets so that they can pursue that on their own. As long as they're moving the needle forward, however they get there, doesn't matter to me. I just want to make sure that they do because, those, again, the authenticity part of it is part of who I am. And if I can work with others that are continuing to be authentically themselves and to help others, that's really where these things line up for me. So with that said, I know we covered a lot of things today, but I hope that from this you'll take away the value that marketing has in its ability to do good for others within the community space. I hope I've provided some workbook or strategic implementation tactics that can help support those methods, and that you feel comfortable now within the fundraising space to understand marketing's value in leading or strongly following, implementing that tactic. And that's all I got today, kiddos. And it is 5 to 1. You could set that watch by it, right? So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to, connect either today or, in the future. But I really appreciate everyone coming today and spending your lunch with me. So I'll go eat my lunch now. But if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it so much. Yeah, so yeah, my contact information will be on those materials that'll come out afterwards. And please feel free to give me a call. We'll have coffee. We'll find out some solutions that work for nonprofits, because obviously I'm a geek about it and I love it. And we'll go from there. So thanks, Erin.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin. I really appreciate your time today and all the information that you shared. It was a wonderful presentation. And for everybody that's still on the call, this was recorded, as you all should have been given notice as when you entered the meeting. So once this recording is rendered and ready to be sent out, I will be following up with an email that contains the recording, the workbook, the presentation, plus Erin's contact information if you haven't grabbed it here yet. I also dropped it in the chat for you as well. So please look out for that email follow-up here in the next day. So thank you all for your time. I greatly appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day, and hope to see you at an AMA event soon.